I'm pleased to be able to announce our next session. So, building a comprehensive care center. We have fantastic presenters with us this morning who have a tremendous amount of information to share on this topic. So please let me introduce Stephanie Oki. She's going to share with us all of her vast experience on care centers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's terrific to be here with you all. I like to walk around, so I'll figure out how it feels like I'm kind of in a living room, but kind of not as well. So I like what Bray said yesterday in her opening, Bray from Duke. It's so nice that you all chose to come. I think this is such a critical topic that pertains to everyone in the room, whether you know or have a family member who is living with a rare condition or not. Health and coordination of care is critical to every one of us as Americans and just people in the world. So I do want to mention a little bit about who I am and why I'm here. I don't think that there's a picture or a profile bio about me in the book, which is actually, I was happy about that, but still I'm also not a random person that they found on the sidewalk either. So I am, just as of a couple of months ago, I'm gonna move up here, the former, I was head of Genzyme's rare disease business in North America. And I worked for Genzyme for 19 years, and before that, I spent 7 years at Genentech. And there is a very specific reason that I'm sure many of you can relate to why I am now former. So my daughter is living with a chronic condition, and it's not rare. And I also think that I have incredible difficulty finding good coordinated care and a physicians and healthcare team that really understands her condition and really helps us as a family in many ways. So I think that what I also believe, and Kelly and Dina and I were speaking about this, rare conditions can inform the common. Because I think when, and you'll tell us, but when we get this right, and the healthcare provider network, the family, anyone that you intersect with has a great level and understanding of knowledge about the condition and is doing everything that is possible to have great outcomes and a healthy life, so that the condition is almost a footnote and we can all do and support our loved ones in doing whatever we can to manifest what we were meant to do here on the earth. So at any rate, it came a time where managing a huge business that is East Coast based, and I live just down the street here in Newport Beach from the West Coast, doing 19 years of that was just a challenging endeavor. And like, I had such incredible support from my family, but my daughter's a junior in high school, and I thought, you know what? I mean, I feel very fortunate that I could do this, but I said, you know, I am never going to get this time back with my daughter. This is too important. She needs me. I need her. I need to have our family running smoothly. So I'm taking a pause. I have retired from Genzyme, but I will never retire from working on behalf of the rare disease community and what we can all accomplish together. And it's such an exciting time that we're living in, so much possibility, and I think that we'll show you what that looks like. So here's how we would like to use the time, and we truly want and know that ideas and thoughts that you have here in the room, we all have something. We all have puzzle pieces that can come together and inform each other and get to a better place and level of care. So what we'd like to do is I'm going to show a few slides and make a few comments, and then Kelly will offer some remarks and slides, as well as Dina, and then we would love to open it up and talk with you. So this is not here randomly. We want to get the thoughts down, and the goal being, when we leave this room, that you will have practical information that you can take home and hit the ground running. And what we'll promise to do is, if we don't have it for you electronically at the end of the session, I brought my laptop. You will get it before you leave here and have something back to refer to. So I'm going to open up my slides here. let's see, do we have the, thank you. We're going to do this as a team here. Okay. So first of all, before we even start, does everybody know why they're here? Do you know what we're going to talk about? Setting up comprehensive care. You can opt out if you need to gather up your things, or is there anything on anybody's mind that is just a burning need that you want to say or get rolling with before we begin? Everybody's good for now? So don't hesitate to ask any clarifying questions. And I think, our guess is that once we offer some content and some information, your thinking will be spurred on and we'll all be better together for having participated together and think. Okay, so truly what we hope to talk about is what is comprehensive care. I think that just in conversations with people, we all have maybe a little bit of a different nuanced way of looking at it. Why is it important? And how is it set up? How do you do it? And what are the next steps? What truly can we do practically and such? So I'll give you one small story that I think highlights what we're all faced with. So my education is all in the sciences. I worked and made monoclonal antibodies to Pseudomonas exoproteases to look for colonization factors early in CF patients so that we could really identify right when the lungs become infected with a bug that ultimately causes the demise. So I saw my life being something that I was going to hopefully be a part of the cure and all of that. Well, one thing leads to the next, and I ended up working in the commercial side of Genentech, hoping to have gotten my foot in the door to ultimately do research there on CF. So anyway, I say that because I didn't have a business background, and the idea of selling something was very scary to me. I didn't understand, but then when I was explained that it's really about education, that became better. And one of the things that Genentech did was sell what was called a clot buster, or TPA, for heart attacks. So I would go out, educate, talk about the products and the like. Genentech was a terrific company to work for, all was well. So fast forward to 19 years ago when I joined Genzyme. And when I was interviewing for the position, they said, I almost felt like at a point they were trying to talk me out of this. And I said, what could be so hard? You've got a product for Gaucher patients. They need it. And, I almost felt like, and one person said to me, actually, Rich Mashiski, who is Assistant Deputy Director now of the FDA, said, you will be asked questions that you never see coming, and you'll have to create things that don't currently exist. And I found that bewildering a little bit, but then it all came clear to me 4 weeks into my role at Genentech. at Genzyme. I got a phone call from a very famous geneticist in New York, and the person said, I just diagnosed a young man with Gaucher disease in Nampa, Idaho. I need you to go there. I need you to find a physician that will write orders and talk to me and care about him. I then need you to go to the high school and meet with the principal, the guidance counselor, and anyone that has close connections with this individual, because he's going to have to miss school every other week, to get his infusions. Then I want you to go to the family and talk with them about navigating their insurance, and also go to the hospital where he'll likely be infused, and make sure that everyone that touches the therapy understands Gaucher disease and how to give the product and such. And oh, by the way, I need this to be done in 48 hours. So then I got it. Because at Genentech, not one time in the almost 8 years I worked there did a physician ask me, what is a heart attack? How would you diagnose a heart attack? And will you please come over here to our emergency department and help us set up care? That never happened. So I'm sure, have any of you been in the situation where you've had to describe the disorder to someone that doesn't know about it, that you're living with? many of us have. That's just part of the circumstance. There's rarity of the disorder, and frankly, the scarcity of information that makes it so compelling and challenging. So, and also I think we have to play the hand that we're dealt. So in the United States, the World Health Organization recently came out with some data where they really looked across the global landscape and said, you know, is there some country that's really got it right? You know, is there a country that can we learn something from each other? Well, in a stack ranking that all the countries actually got mad about, except for France and Italy, who got number 1 and number 2. The US was like 30-something. They talked about the pros and cons of the different healthcare systems around the globe. And the most compelling comments about the US is, the US system is highly complicated, fragmented, and very expensive. And I think we've all probably experienced that in some regard. And in some ways, though I'm sure they would have different things to say, places like the UK that have a Ministry of Health, it's not so random. There are 7 centers that exist in the country. You know, as a person, if you've got something unusual, you get yourself there and they will work with you. But the US is not in that regard. So this is, just for the sake of, you know, kind of a scene setter, this is a conceptual approach of what comprehensive care could look like. Now I can tell you, we could go very deep and wide on this. There are a lot of ways to talk about comprehensive care. But in this regard, there are certain tried and true elements that seem to be important when you're talking about building out comprehensive care. Frankly, we all need a physician somewhere at the heart of things that is knowledgeable and or cares. And I've seen both work. So for example, sometimes a good way to approach this is, clearly there are people that are doing research or there's somewhere living a person that probably knows more about the disorder or has a research interest. And that's always a good place to start and the like. Sometimes they're PhDs and don't offer care, but you know, somebody that is passionate about it. On the other hand, we've also found that there are some individuals that are significant humanitarians and want to help. But I can tell you, and you probably all experience this, if someone doesn't care or have a motivation to keep things going, it is not going to be sustainable. And then the second thing, which I think could almost be more important, is a center coordinator or somebody that's like the quarterback that keeps all the systems and channels in place and running. So maybe I'll offer to you what good could look like, and we can maybe disagree and talk about this a little bit later when we have the dialogue, but I'll offer to you a suggestion. If you could have a circumstance where every symptom that you or your loved one or your friends, there is an individual that is on that particular area where everything is being monitored, well understood. There are many comorbidities in rare disorders. So it's almost like what we've truly done sometimes is made a list of what types of physician specialties could an individual truly come in contact with. I mean, literally down to dentists or emergency room physicians. And this is where the great crossover is, because another lesson that we've learned is when a physician becomes knowledgeable and sees what can happen in caring for patients with rare diseases, they typically can translate that into interest in other areas. So it's not random that there are many people, physicians in the United States, that are caring for a lot of types of people with rare disorders because they already know the nuances, they know the questions that need to be answered, they know in their facility what needs to be done. So this little schematic, so at any rate, if you have got a team of people that care, that are knowledgeable, and that are accessible to you, that is at least a great place to start. And certainly, I think a critical element is having those people be involved with and aware of your patient organizations, your advocacy groups, and certainly Global Genes, who has tremendous resources. Nicole has devoted, and her team are so devoted that you have got more support than you probably are even aware of. But again, so back to this schematic. And by the way, that care is accessible to you financially as well, or that you have resources to where everything is sustainable going forward, collecting data so that you know what is happening, what is the result that you're being afforded. So this is a concept where you've got a center physician and coordinator, and this kind of a conceptual approach, this could be a building like a Mount Sinai where literally a physician and the coordinator work with different specialty groups. This happens to be a schematic of, for example, Gaucher disease. And so we've got a center coordinator that has on that team, for example, at Mount Sinai, actually, I'm sorry, this is Fabre, a nephrologist, hematologist, oncologist, basically any symptom that would be represented in the condition, people are available in there, and then infusion sites and the patient advocacy groups if there is a therapy that is specific for the disorder or at least palliative or could help in that particular condition. So this is, I would submit, just kind of a visual of what that could look like. It could also be virtual. We're living in such interesting times that we've seen it now, that physicians that are knowledgeable will do consults or Skype consults and the like. So this could literally be an example of, which frankly happens, of a Mount Sinai or a Yale or an Emory, but the nephrologist happens to be in Tucson, Arizona. But as long as you've got some of these elements, you have things to work with. So, taking inventory, this is something that I would highly encourage you to do. And this is a real example that was done when I was at Genzyme about 5 or 6 years ago. So as a little bit of an exercise that we worked with the patient organizations, and so as not to embarrass any region or metro region of the company, or country, I'm sorry, you'll see that we divided up the U.S. into metro regions, kind of 13A through N here across horizontally, and then listed down the left side, ideally, what knowledgeable specialists or specialties would exist in that region so that families had a reasonable place to go in their local area. So it's really sitting down and taking inventory. What have we got on our side? Or where are the gaps? And so you'll see here, other than column N, which represents a region of the country, you know, red in this case is not good. That means you've basically got nothing going on in that compartment and the like. And you'll see green represents where there, I believe, are 3 or more, and some of these, this is a little bit outdated, but you'll see that there is, the takeaway, there's a lot of work to be done. And this is, again, in a neuromuscular domain and such for a neuromuscular disorder. But I would highly, you have to kind of know where you start and know where you're trying to get. So doing a little bit of a balanced scorecard like this, and because you know what, when you show physicians something like this, the examples that I've witnessed myself is kind of shock, but also kind of, wow, you know, there is something that we need to do here. We are not serving the community, and this is not okay. And I'll give you an example that shows the real negative of this. There's been some talk about clinical studies and how to get involved, and that's great. So once you get to the clinical study, though, the hardship sometimes that patients have to face, I know there was a study that Genzyme was doing where literally an individual had to, every other week, be driven 6 hours in an ambulance to the study site, go through the requirements of the study, and then go back. That, no one can think that is ideal. So we have got a big issue in the United States as far as rare conditions, because I think that we'll all declare victory when literally everyone in the United States or around the world lives within a reasonable amount of distance from someone that can quickly and early diagnose their condition and then have a support system of care and knowledge that can really help them through the journey that they'll undergo, keeping their health in the best possible place. All right, and again, we can go in, I think it'll be good to go into some conversations and examples deeper, but here's the other part of this. There are great benefits in this for centers. Centers are businesses, and what we've seen, this is just two examples where, and these come from the cancer arena, but literally facilities want to distinguish themselves. And so I've got many articles and examples of the fact that centers, and their marketing departments, they can use, for example, your disorder or your condition to show that they are experts. They're, this one here on let's see, the right is Massachusetts General. And frankly, a competitive, quote, competitive facility in the area, Beth Israel, they're talking about, you see some of the bylines here, a single place, a world of care. That's important and interesting. I would much rather go to a place where I could get my care, or my daughter's care, all organized, and someone that can do it in a way that I get everything done on a Tuesday. I don't have to come back every week or cobbled together, and that's what I think that we deserve and should aspire to. That care is organized and coordinated, so again, you can go about the business of living your life with the health aspect part managed in a way that's fluid and sustainable for folks. So let's see, just one more little example of ideas, I think. So what I've seen through many disorders, and by the way, I've been part of 13 commercializations of orphan products and 3 launches of large market. So this is kind of an aggregation of everything I've witnessed and the themes that seem to be important. So one thing is you need to start kind of, as Pat has said, with the end in mind. What is the vision? What do you want to accomplish? Again, these are just kind of tried and true elements for the approach. There will be, and I'm sure, has anybody had a difficult day navigating the rare world? Yeah. Almost like every day on some level you're explaining or what have you. So I think that, the thing that I like to encourage people is this, you are not alone. Keeping a positive attitude and a glass half full approach is critical. And the fact that you're cheerleading the group that you're trying to coordinate, this can be done. You will be, and this is actually a cool aspect, you're creating things that didn't exist before, that frankly will also help other patient organizations. I've got some examples that I can talk about later where there are certain areas of the country that were set up to provide great neuromuscular care, but also because the connections have been made, they're having great care for hemophilia or cystic fibrosis or neurofibromatosis. Always remember, I think, is it meeting the needs? You heard Bray and others talk about a 6-minute walk test. This is a family living with Fabry disease. And you can create all kinds of exciting things, but if it doesn't meet the needs of people living with the disorder, it's really, you're missing the mark. And lastly, so that there's this continuing progression or upward spiral of good, making sure that you sit down with all of the stakeholders and share the information. Okay, what have we done? What are the gaps? What can we do better? And making sure that everyone's aligned, and then you can start back, okay, so now can we refine our vision? We're going to keep working at this positively. So you just have this upward spiral of an ability to start somewhere with the end in mind and get somewhere, everybody in the room here in the upper left-hand corner having their role and knowing what to do next. So again, this was notably something to kind of set a broad context and the like, and I'd love to invite Kelly up now to talk about some specific examples, followed by Dina, and then we'll open it up to everyone. Thank you. There you go.
Thanks, Stephanie. So it was great for Stephanie to start off from somebody from kind of an industry perspective to talk about, the coordination of medical care. It's not only important for us as family members if you're an actual advocate or if you have a child, but it's also important for industry partners. As she pointed out, it's important for the healthcare industry, the business aspect of it as well. So I get to tell you the story about what it's like to be the parent. and kind of share a little bit about my journey of how I got invited by Nicole and the Global Genes team to be up here. And hopefully be able to answer at the end of the discussion for those of you that are a parent, that are frustrated, that can't quite figure out how to get your care coordinated or to build a center or to be able to network with physicians or to build platforms to be able to do research. Give you a little bit insight of kind of how our organization got there, and then be able to answer some of those questions for you. So to do that, I think the first question anybody has to ask themselves is, why do you want it, right? Because you do have to want it. It is a journey, right? As I've heard time and time again, I think I have a type A personality that everything should be done yesterday. I don't know how many of you in the room have that same personality, right? So the fact that it took me 2 years to finally actually open the doors to the clinic, and then another 5 years, I feel like, are you kidding me? I could have got this done. Like, it does take a journey, so you have to remember why it is. So in order to do that, I'm going to take you back, and we're going to have a little biology 101 lesson. So in biology, you either have XY, which then results in being a male, right? Chromosome, we're talking about sex chromosomes. Or you have XX, which will end you up as a female. But what happens by chance if you're XO, right? Human beings were not made to live with a single sex chromosome. It just wasn't. Many of our kids can live without a certain gene, but this just wasn't supposed to happen. And so if you were a boy and you lost your Y, you would never make it to live birth. And if you happen to be a girl and you lost one of your X's, 99% of you wouldn't have made it to live birth. In fact, it's about 15% of all miscarriages happen because of this condition. In my case, we were very blessed because there's my XO. So that's my daughter, Allie, and my dog, Tasha. Allie's 17 right now, but this is 8 years old. This is the year we got her diagnosis. We waited 8 years of me being that crazy mom that kept saying, I think something's wrong. I think something's wrong. And my pediatrician, love her to death, said, no, she's fine. She's petite, she's little, she's a girl, she'll catch up, those type of things. Okay, so after those 8 years and me finally saying, I'm not leaving your office until you run a test. Call me crazy, I might be crazy, but I'm not leaving your office. What's important about that, though, is when we finally did get Allie's diagnosis, in the medical world, it's called Turner syndrome, and it only affects little girls. When we did get that diagnosis, that changed my whole world. So I went from having a pediatrician, because at 8 years old, that's what you have. You have one doctor, and it's a pediatrician, and that service is for all your kids' needs, to literally, in a 1-hour meeting, when I got her diagnosis, to still having my pediatrician, but now this is what I have. I was told overnight, these are all of the specialists that you will have to access to take care of your daughter. I don't know about you guys, but in Kansas City, when you try to access these many doctors, you get told, yep, we have an appointment in 6 months. Or we might do this in 12 months. Well, we have to screen her first to see if she's eligible for that. Or you know what? Exactly, right? This is everywhere. She made a point, it's everywhere, right? Trying to access care. And then when you finally get in with the doctor, how many of you had to like bring your laptop so the doctor could Google what it was the underlying condition, let alone what they want to do with it, right? That was extremely frustrating to me as a mom. I'm like, oh my goodness, we have this great pediatric hospital in Kansas City. You have all these providers, but that's the care. That's how I've got to navigate this care. And so I said, you know, it has to be better. It has to deliver care better. The Mayo Clinic, perfect example. Why can they be so successful in the middle? If any of you guys have been there, it's in the middle of nowhere, Minnesota. They're so successful because they coordinate care. You go there, you meet with the team. Yeah, maybe not. They do the best job.
Room for improvement.
Yeah. So that becomes the challenge, right? Is we have to find how to coordinate that care. Well, then when you have all those doctors, right? So we have this problem in our society anyways, right? Just in general, not in the rare disease community, that we're all deemed as kind of the helicopter parent, right? We're flying over, we're hovering. We feel like it's our job to control and to fix all problems and those type of things. Well, can you imagine now becoming that parent when your child has a rare disease diagnosis? Watch out, here we come.
That's right, be ready.
Right? Fully loaded, here we come, we're flying in. Well, that doesn't always work so well with healthcare professionals, right? And so when we build a clinic and we build this resource, you really have to think about partnerships, because it is a partnership, right? There's nothing we're more passionate about that we want more than good care for our child. So when we go in and we engage, one of the things I would say is keep the mindset of building a partnership. It's about relationships. Everything in life is about relationships. If you have a good relationship with somebody, it's much better to work with them. So how to advocate for a clinic? You know, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because actually Dana has a lot of information, those type of things. But as Stephanie said, it's just really a summary of determine the specific needs of your population. Make sure you know what those needs are. Make sure you know what specialists you are going to need to access. And maybe not specifically your child, because my child doesn't have maybe the cardiac issues that another little girl with Turner syndrome does. But if I'm going to create a model, I want to make sure that the entire disease process and every uniqueness that happens can be covered and receive those services. Identify a potential organizational partner, right? Who's going to be your partner? If you need somebody that can accept Medicaid, because we want to make sure that they accept all payment sources. There's nothing worse as being a parent of knowing that care is out there, but you can't access it because you can't afford it. So I would encourage you guys, if you're looking to build a clinic, find that organizational partnership that makes it right, and don't ever set your families up for not being able to access really good care. Find your medical champion. Stephanie says you have to have it. Does it have to be a physician? No, it can be a nurse practitioner. It might be a genetic counselor. Find that person that's passionate and that understands your disease. Ask yourself, what's in it for them? It's about a relationship. Know that organization. In Kansas City, it wasn't about, in Kansas City, it was about, they're very focused on patient-centered care. We have a whole department inside our hospital organization that's about family care. I already knew that that was part of their mission. I knew part of their mission was that they wanted national exposure, because we sit in the middle of the heartland and we call ourselves the flyover state. So anything that gets them national exposure, that was important to them. I knew that going in. And how did I know that? I tell most of my new families in our organizations, if you want one in your hometown, join your family advisory board. Every hospital has a family advisory board or a patient advisory board. Join that board, because you're going to get connected with administrative people. You're going to get connected in the hospital. You're going to build relationships with people that will open doors quicker than you try doing it yourself. And you'll know kind of strategically what the hospital's vision is and how can you relate what you want into their vision. Analyze the financial projections business model. As Stephanie pointed out, it is a business. Healthcare is a business. So one of the things that they're going to ask you is, well, who's going to pay for this? I can tell you that the model that we built, I didn't raise a dime for. And that's what makes it doable for your organization. You know, a lot of the big centers of excellence, you talk about it, and there are a lot of disease states that have been able to build that, but they have to put up a lot of funding to incentivize those programs to do it. I would argue that model is fantastic if you happen to be an organization that has millions of dollars. But if you're small like ours and we don't have a lot of funding, you need to show why this is a better business model to the hospital. We've been able to do that. It decreases no-show rates. It allows them a competitive edge. So now instead of families going to their competitors, our model, because of where we live, we have families now that travel from 6 states to come to our resource. That's important for administrative from a business side. And then remember, again, like I said before, it's a marathon. It's not going to happen overnight. I had this great video. I wish I could show it to you. Our clinic is called the Great Heights Clinic in Kansas City. The picture that you're seeing right now, the great thing about our clinic, and we're going to talk just a little bit briefly about this, is you know what? Our community embraces it. It has brought our community out. They love our girls. So in our clinic, when we talk about advocating for a center of excellence, each clinic looks different. What we can offer in Kansas City, we have 17 pediatric endocrinologists that are part of our hospital. If you go to North Dakota, they do not have 17. They don't even have 17 in the entire state, let alone 17 in one hospital. So each clinic has to be able to be flexible enough to look a little different. But the things that we think are important, it's important to have networking. As rare disease families, to connect with other families is priceless. To me, I would argue sometimes it's almost even as good as coordinated care, to be able to sit in a waiting room and coordinate and talk to families that are going through the same thing that you're going through. There's got to be an education piece. We, in our clinic model, we actually do a lunch and learn. The hospital sponsors it for us. We bring in guest speakers. We locally, through our advocacy organization, we fly in the national speakers, so the guys that then will train our doctors there to make sure our doctors are trained in the specialty. Comprehensive coordinated care with all of the specialists. We call it one-day shopping. I want all of my visits coordinated. I don't want to have to take off work. I don't want to have to bring my daughter in 1,000 times in a year to be able to do that. That's a hardship on our family. And then transition. Huge component that's missing in most of pediatric care right now is that transition part. And so in order for our clinics to be recognized as the gold standard clinic, you have to have all of this. Now, how you have all that can be unique to the resources you have. So we currently have 28 Turner Syndrome Clinic programs. Kansas City, our model in Kansas City is a gold standard. That only started 5 years ago. Are all of the clinics the same way? No, we took an approach in our organization. We didn't care. If you are a one provider that loves Turner Syndrome and has a passion, you know what? We're going to connect you with us, because what we did then is we now coordinate a monthly call with all of those clinics that have to be on that call to say, how can we share resources? Who can reinvent? I'm all about sharing resources, not reinventing the wheels. How can we support each other? And then how can we start coordinating research initiatives? The other thing too with Global Genes in Kansas City, this model works not only for Turner syndrome. So our clinic model has been shared with other organizations. In Kansas City, we're working right now because it's a collaborative effort between all of us, no matter what your disease state is, to be able to bind. So now the clinic, we've partnered with our research entities to start developing the academic research pieces of it as well. So I am going to turn it over to Dina and let her talk a little about their model.
Thank you, Kelly. So a lot has been said already about how to build a center and the thought process behind it and why we need centers. And most of you here who are caring for rare disease patients or a patient yourself understand the need for these centers. So you'll see a lot of the slides are similar, so I will skip over them, but I'll just talk to you a little bit about CARES Foundation. So CARES stands for Congenital Adrenal Hyperplasia Research, Education, and Support Foundation. I know it's a mouthful. So basically, we support patients with congenital adrenal hyperplasia, or CAH. It's a disorder that affects the adrenal glands. It's an adrenal insufficiency. And there are basically two types of CAH. Classical CAH, which is typically detected at birth. We now have newborn screening for CAH. And then there's this non-classic, which is a less severe form, and it can be detected anytime, even into adulthood. There are certain populations that are affected more than others. You know, I'm not going to go into that whole thing. I just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview. So the rationale for developing a comprehensive care center for CAH. Again, it's the same story for all of us. There's fragmented care, not enough specialists, and you know, we looked at some of the models that exist, like cystic fibrosis and cancer, and those models work well. So we decided that we were going to approach this, and because we now have newborn screening, and for patients with non-classic CAH who were often and still are misdiagnosed with other disorders, but have gone, you know, their entire life into their 30s, 40s, and 50s with symptoms that haven't been diagnosed or properly diagnosed. So we saw obviously the need for these centers. So what we set out to do, and what I want to point out is that there's no one way to do this. There are different ways to approach this, and Kelly and I met yesterday, and we were talking about our different approaches. So as she described, they didn't put any money into this. We did. They didn't develop care guidelines. We took the opposite route. They started the clinics and then worked on standards of care and so forth. We got some funding, some government funding. We brought together a group of 55 individuals from primarily across the country, but across the globe as well. We had doctors from Germany and the UK and Brazil. And what we also did was include patients. And prior to bringing those specialists together, we held focus group meetings, either in person or on the phone with patients, and talked about what are their needs, what are the barriers to accessing care, and then we were able to bring them to this meeting. Before we gathered everyone in the room to write the guidelines, we had individual teams working either via conference call or email, addressing the various aspects, so education, clinical care, all of the pieces that are involved in a comprehensive care center. So we developed those guidelines, and Kelly talked about, and Stephanie, about it being a long process, not something that's going to happen tomorrow, although you want it to happen tomorrow or yesterday. We started in 2009 writing these guidelines. In late 2010, we gathered a group of some of the doctors, and again included patients, to develop minimum requirements for these centers, and developed an application, which, by the way, has evolved. So you can start here, but as you go along, you realize that maybe I have to tweak that application, or perhaps it's not enough to have these 5 specialists. We need 7. So it's evolving. So in late 2010, we brought this committee together. We called it our pilot committee, and then in 2013. We opened our first, or we designated our first center at New York Presbyterian Weill Cornell in New York City, and that was our pilot program. So we decided we were going to wait 2 years to try to iron out some of the issues, and we're still not 100% there, but we took 2 years before we decided to designate another center. So again, Stephanie shared this, and Kelly talked about it again, the CAC concept. So all the different aspects, the coordinated care, the advocacy, the research, education, support, which is so critical, and we've done a lot of work over the last year and a half on supporting patients, and I'll talk a little bit about that. A registry and expertise. So this is a concept that most centers are going to follow. Stakeholders, we talked about it already. So some of the stakeholders that I don't think were discussed before were donors. And in our case, because we supported the centers financially, there are stakeholders as well. Importance on consumers, the patients and parents, and then the various specialists. So ideally, the setting is going to be an academic center because you want to do research. You want to have as many resources available as possible. Then we talk about intake, or the entry into a system. So how do patients get referred? So it's from organizations like yours, and that's primarily how patients are going to be referred. Community healthcare providers, newborn screening programs, if there is newborn screening for your disorder. A single point, you want to have a single point of intake, a clinical care coordinator, which is so important. And then you have the providers. So let me apologize for this image. So the internet or Google isn't always as current as it should be. I know most of the nurses don't look like this, at least not in the U.S. So the reason we decided that we were going to provide some funding for our centers was because we felt very strongly that we need one person to be the care coordinator, sort of the navigator of care for your patient. So if you call the center and you say, you know, my child is having, you know, problems in school dealing with her disorder, or, you know, my 19-year-old or 18-year-old is now sexually active, you know, we need to talk to a gynecologist. So you need someone who can say, all right, these are the people you need to see. You know, maybe your child is having weight issue problems. Our patients take steroids, so, you know, weight is a problem for many of them. So we decided that we were going to provide seed funding to support that coordinator position for 2 years. You know, like Kelly, we're a small organization. We don't have a ton of funding, and I know many of you are in the same position. So we decided that we would do it for 2 years. What we did in the application process is we required that the institution commit to funding that position after those 2 years, because you don't want to be in a position where, you know, you now have a center. This is a critical role in the center that you need funding for, and you don't want after the 2 years, you know, for patients to be left again to navigate their own care. So that's what we built into our process. But again, this is what we decided to do. I know that not everyone is in the same position, and people take different approaches. And I can speak for myself, and I'm sure for Kelly and Stephanie as well. We'll be available later to ask any questions that you may have, but, you know, there are different approaches. So, you know, I guess you can look at it as the bad news is sometimes you need to provide funding, but the good news, and this is what we found this year, so earlier this year or late last year, we sent out applications to institutions that were interested in being designated a center of excellence. We got a ton back, and then when we reviewed the applications, it's a lengthy process. We reviewed the applications. I had the task of first calling the center that was awarded, because we have a scorecard. I called them and said, you received the designation, and then I also had the task of calling the centers that didn't make it. So obviously they were upset, but what we found is that although they wanted the funding and they felt that this position was very important, they were willing to take the designation without the money. They said, we want the designation. Again, because it brings prestige to the institution. It's a good business model because, you know, again, it's a business, so they want the income. So instead of awarding one center a designation this year, we were able to do 3, because 2 of them said, we want to be a center. We don't care about we care about the money, but we'll take it without the money. And then there were a couple that didn't meet the criteria, although they were great institutions, and we still refer to them. And we're talking now about how we offer a different designation because they don't meet the strict criteria that we set out. One big piece of this process, and an area that sometimes is missed because there aren't enough specialists or because there isn't funding available, is the psychosocial aspect of a rare disorder and how it affects patients. So this is a piece where you can all be supportive with your support groups and as an organization and networking and counseling other patients. Transition of care, which Kelly talked about, is key. We often have calls from, you know, nervous parents of kids who are going to college, or even from doctors whose institutions won't allow them to treat a patient past, you know, the age of 16 or 17, you know, helping make that transition. So that's key. I'm going to skip over this because we're running out of time. In our case, some of our girls with a classical form of CAH are born with ambiguous genitalia, so they require highly specialized surgery. And there are only a few centers in the country that that do it well, and they have patients come from across the globe. So that's another component that's important in our centers. Support groups. We've always had support groups across the country, and people can always call a support group leader in their community or their state and talk over the phone or via email. But what we've started doing, especially with the pediatric population and the newborns, is we started to hold monthly newborn screenings for those parents whose child is first diagnosed. That's the most critical period. And then we have for others, women and parents of young adults and so forth. But we've asked our directors and the doctors in our centers of excellence to participate. And I have to tell you that, yes, they're providing great answers for patients and easing their fears. But what I've also learned from them is that, and heard from them, is that they are learning so much from these patients. So if you have an opportunity, if you have physicians and other healthcare professionals who are committed to your patients, consider involving them, because that's been so important, not only for the patient, but also for the doctors, because they see the whole patient. I'm not going to go into structure. It can look different for many of you, and Kelly already talked about this, again, more structure. So some of the barriers: insurance limitations, lack of resources on behalf of the patients, lack of specialists, and again, we're all in the same boat, lack of communication within the providers, electronic medical records, multidisciplinary conferences is a way you can approach that. Lack of a formal transition program. So again, that's why, or education, that's why these centers are so important. I think this is let me skip over this. We now, as I mentioned, we have 4 centers: New York Presbyterian, Weill Cornell, Cohen Children's on Long Island, Riley Children's Hospital in Indiana, and CHLA in conjunction with Cedars-Sinai. Okay, so here's a challenge for all of you. One of our issues is that patients don't always have the resources to travel to a center of excellence. And if you're a patient in New York and you have CAH, you're in good shape. We have 2 centers of excellence. If you're in Kansas, no. If you are in North Dakota, no. So what I'd like to see and ask the rare disease community to do and join us is to lobby Congress to ensure that the Affordable Care Act, and I don't care what side of the act you're on, whether you're pro or against, I think it's critically important that patients, rare disease patients, have access to quality health care. They deserve it, they need it, and it's a cost savings, because if you're going to a specialist once a month and you're well managed, you're usually in good shape. If you're going to someone who knows nothing about your condition, I've had doctors say to me, well, I kind of read a page about CAH in one of my medical books, but I don't really have any patients. I've never seen a patient. I don't know. We've had patients or parents call from the emergency room. I've had to call the president of hospital several times and say, you better get somebody to see our patient in the emergency room or you're going to have a lawsuit on your hands. So it just makes sense to me. So I urge all of you to perhaps join in this effort and make sure that we have access to quality health care for all of our patients. Thank you.
Okay, so I am feeling incredibly guilty because I went long. We have lost a lot of time for discussion. So I have an idea here. I think it's about, about 4 minutes until noon? All right, so 2 things. One is, if anyone wants to stay in this room, unless we're going to get kicked out, I would love to aggregate some of your thoughts, ideas, or questions. But what I promise is that we will turn around kind of like a white paper and resources for you. I literally would love just to unload a lot of things that have worked onto paper and get that to you if you would be interested in something like that. It's such an exciting time. There's so much possibility out there. This could be a whole summit in and of itself, this topic. So let me start with, does anyone have any questions or things that have worked that we could record and aggregate and learn from each other? I don't have a... Oh, here we go. Got it. Any questions? Any particularly hard? Yes, please. Okay.
So a lot of the patients are multi-care, and in one center, you may not have an expert that knows about your rare disorder. How do you deal with this situation to ensure that if you send someone to a center, that you have an expert that is going to be able to address it with somebody at that center? Is that a consideration?
Yes, perfect. Okay. So there's a couple of ways to get after that. So I'm going to assume, for the sake of this example, that there's somebody at the center that knows about your disorder, and then you've got your list of specialties that you need to know. So one thing is to find someone and cultivate them in that center. The other is to virtually attach someone that's not there but will agree to be a part of the team. So here's something that works around across the board. And I will have to say also, if you're working with someone in industry, they can help you as well. If you have, again, someone that either manufactures a solution or what have you. But at any rate, here's the concept. Write down every specialty that you want to have in your center. And there's a couple of things that you can see are going to go from good to better to best. One idea that University of Iowa, for example, did is they deliberately went to every department that they thought could be in touch with the Fabry patient. They did a grand rounds talk on that topic. We're going to give a talk. And so people came. So this idea evolved. First of all, the physician just did a talk and invited the nephrology department. Nothing really happened. Next, they did a talk, brought a Fabry patient, and that was better because physicians were really interested. I would like to do that. And then thirdly, they evolved to a place where, and this is what I would highly recommend, have a grand rounds or some kind of a roundtable discussion where physicians are invited. Have yourself or a patient that would be willing to come and talk. And thirdly, this is critical, ask for help. Literally say, wait a minute, before you leave your chicken dinner and go home, who of you will help us? Who of you will literally be part of our center? We need you to do this. It's just the simple asking, and that has worked so well. But I would say, if you want to cultivate somebody there, have the physician or the nurse set up a formal or informal gathering of the physicians in that department, bring a patient and ask them. And that has worked wonders in many, many places. Or like I say, if someone knows, physicians have a lot of academic ties. They've been to college. They know people. Sometimes you can say to an expert, did you ever train with someone, or do you know somebody in radiology in Tucson? And if they don't, I bet they know somebody that does. So you can do a lot of networking just by asking the question and making it interesting. So does that help a little bit, maybe? No? Yes?
So we're trying to figure out a way to have I don't want to say center, but they need hospital rooms that are safe when they come in.
Yep.
And they need staff that are trained, that know how to deal with it and to eliminate any triggers or things like that that would actually cause them to, be threatened with their lives. And I don't know how, we're talking about it. I talked to a couple doctors, but I don't know how to get the funds, or do I need funds? Do I go to the hospital? Where's the best place to start? We also want to have a clinic with our title of our condition, which is mastocytosis. So, but we're just beginning, and I don't know.
So here's a suggestion, and please, Kelly and Dina, weigh in. But for example, I know someone right now, Deborah De Salvatore, who's a geneticist in New Jersey. She's the head of New Jersey's desire to bring forward newborn screening. And what she is doing, so there's not an issue about the clinic, but I would say, to specifically answer your question, one of two things. One is, if you have an academic center that already is expert in some elements of that, you kind of want to play the hand that you're dealt. So start there and ask the physician or the center coordinator, can we have a meeting and get people involved and enrolled and behind this idea to create something here. The second best thing to do would be these virtual medical appointments. And I know Deborah De Salvatore is basically saying she's a person that wants to retire in the next 10 years, doesn't have anyone right out to and she's got the big state of New Jersey, there are others that are bigger, that she is responsible for newborn screening and also doing her clinics. So they are looking at doing virtual medical examinations for people. And so she's already down the path of that and is writing up a template, kind of like a how-to. She knows that she's got to set up her own system, and she wants to be able to help others that are facing this kind of a thing. So I would have your physician or yourself talk to somebody like Deborah, and she can help you.
I like that idea of the virtual appointments. The problem is when they're in the hospital, and a lot of times they end up in ICU. And so it's high care, critical care, but yet those environments are very unsafe for these patients. And that's what's so difficult. So.
Yeah, and I would also just say, and we can talk also on the side about this, but I would venture to say this, somewhere somebody's doing this. Maybe it's not mastocytosis, but somebody's doing this somewhere. And we can figure that out and replicate. It's like not reinventing the wheel and the like. But I'm sorry? No, absolutely. I'll help you. We can
So
talk.
maybe we have time for just one more question.
That would be great.
Thank you.
Hi. I'm one of those people that is a coordinated care success person.
A coordinated care success?
Success. We went 8 years with no diagnosis. With my doctor saying there's something going on, with me saying there's something going on, because all the kids had special needs. We were bounced, we won't mention the hospital, from one doctor to another. I finally left one hospital when they told me there was nothing wrong and I was being an overprotective parent. And my youngest child didn't walk till he was almost 2. Yeah, I don't think so. We went to Mass General, who has a coordinated care program for the pediatrics. And what they have is, it's so nice, they have 2 pediatricians that you meet with, who then decide which specialist you're going to go see. But the nice part of it is once you see those specialists, the 2 pediatricians and all the specialists you saw sit down at the same table and say, okay, this is what I'm seeing in genetics, this is what I'm seeing in neurology, and they put the pieces together.
Yep.
I'd say within 6 months, we had our answers. And
That's
it totally turned everything around. First thing I was going to say, one of the programs I would like to see, and I don't see it out there yet, is a genetic family home program.
Yes.
Right
Yep.
now, they have a genetic program. You go to your genetic home. But there's no place for us to go when we've passed it down, because it's like a spider's web. What affects me affects the child.
Yes.
Because I can't drive, my daughter has to leave work to pick up the child. I would like to see that. And the other thing, I met somebody today, and I may have my answer as to what's going on with me, but it made me realize that NORD or Global Genes or whoever needs to set up a clearinghouse for our disabilities, for all the specialists around the country to punch in. Somebody can punch in and say, hey, look, we're seeing a connective disorder. We think we're seeing a connective disorder with the syndrome. And the guys in the Midwest. So when I'm having issues and my specialist can't figure it out, rather than sending me for all these tests where it possibly, maybe it might be this, but it has nothing to do with anything else, can punch in my syndrome first and
Yes.
see what they're seeing and see if anything matches what I'm going through before they're sending me all over the place to do different things.
No, that is a great idea, and I think that NORD and Global Genes for sure has a ton of resources. I want to suggest one thing before we go. Today, or as soon as you can, go home, write up in a concise bit what the disorder is, and including the genetic piece. get the name and number of a world expert and put it on a jump drive and carry that with you. Have it in your car at all times. Make several copies of it because you never know where you're going to be, where you're going to end up, and somebody needs to know, and you've got everything organized in your own medical record.
I have a team that I've sort of developed by myself with all the numbers. I'm very careful with team. We have a name on it, but ours is so rare that nobody knows.
Yep.
And the only ones I will allow on the team, I have no problem with doctor says, I don't know them when we pull out.
Yes.
And they're the only other ones we allow on the team, and we're gonna laugh, but the minute I get the slightest feeling that a doctor feels like he knows everything, or has the arrogant thing,
Yeah.
they're off the team. My doctors, I have to be sure, like I said first thing, you wanna be on my team, you've gotta be able to cooperate with everybody else in Waitsville,
Yeah.
because that's how.
No, thank you all. Again, this is a great topic. We will get you some tangible resources, and please contact any of us. Anyway, thank you. Thank you so much.